In these moments is when you see society really flourish in a way. You see these people come together, and this, what this has done for me is the feeling of feeling at home, which I actually never felt my entire life. So thank you, everyone.
Ana Dammi Falasteeni, a short film that you guys created for a uni project in second year.
Yes.
You submitted it to the BFI London Film Festival, the UK's largest film festival, and they took it on. It's now been screened in their 69th edition of the festival. You know I'm going to ask you, right?
How did that happen?
What grade did you get?
Oh man, that's a funny story actually.
Go on.
My God.
So it didn't start as a new project. It started in October in 2023. We saw a lot of protests, a lot of demonstrations happening. I'm obviously studying film at Newcastle, and I felt a bit of a duty as Omar, as my friend, to use my degree, use my knowledge, my skills to try and do something that can help the both of us to try and understand the situation better, understand Omar's story better. Omar's family's history is very interesting. So I felt like we could put these two things together and just make a really good film with a strong message that was worldwide. It was understood everywhere.
I'd say like around that time for me, in October 2023 was probably some of the harder times that I've experienced in life so far, just in terms of hearing what was happening within my family, and also watching the news and just responding to what happened in Gaza. I think in 1 month, around 15,000 people died within maybe the first like 6 weeks of this conflict. And it was really, really difficult to deal with that, and to kind of, I was at university with all my friends living in our student house, and me and Jay came together, but also I'd say that in a way for me, this was almost the only way I felt that I could express how I was feeling, or to kind of navigate the emotions that were coming to the surface at that time. So that's kind of.
Were you confiding in Jay? Is that like how you guys?
Yeah, I'd say that I genuinely some days I couldn't like leave the house. I was like very emotional, very difficult to kind of go out into public and even just, conform and get on with life and do your uni projects and everything. And it's just this really unique set of circumstances, I would say. So we made the project, and it evolved into something which ended up being a short film in the way that it is now. But initially, actually, it started out as kind of an exploration of me being at these protests every day and kind of
feeling numb by what you're listening to at every protest, and you go home. And I think this is like a strong part of the film, what it touches on, I think halfway through, how you're attending the protests, you're listening to people speak, but you still feel like you're unable to really do anything that has any drastic change, or you're involved, but you're not really involved to the extent that people in Palestine or what other people are really doing on the ground. So I felt like the film speaks a message of spreading solidarity and understanding a little bit more about the history through a personal story, which is also known everywhere.
So it wasn't an assignment?
So it became into an assignment, but first we started sort of filming Newcastle's response, the community in Newcastle. There's a lot of different Palestinians. There's a big broad of range of people in Newcastle. So we thought we'd film everyone's reaction, going to demonstrations, going to protests, and then switched it on a sort of take on one person's story to narrow down on one character, if you like. And Omar became the character. But it was only in, I think, February or March that we started making it into a uni project. And then you had to conform into all the criteria that uni projects require.
It's like a short documentary module at Newcastle.
Yeah.
And the grade?
Mate, he got a 2-1.
It was a 2-1.
He got a 2-1. He got a 2-1.
The film for the uni project.
And then the uni want to interview us
different.
now. The uni want to interview us. So it's like, he gave us 2-1 though, G. Like,
you sold out within 90 seconds, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
You've got your own premiere tonight, which is also sold out, or
yes,
yeah,
it is.
It's pretty embarrassing for your lecturer, isn't it? So maybe drop him a message, be like, just wanted to show you this interview in Middle East Eye. Thank you for the 2-1.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
How did you two meet?
We met in first year at university. We happened to be in the same student halls. We both joined, not knowing anyone. Omar applied through clearing, so it was really a last-minute decision for you. I deferred my year, so I was a little bit older.
Me and Jay met in first year of university in our student accommodation, and I'd say that pretty much from like the first like days that we were friends, it was a really good friendship that kind of over time, I'd say definitely in that period I was speaking about in October 2023, I feel like I connected with Jay in a way that maybe enabled this kind of film to be made. It's a really like intimate, personal film, and you know when you make films and when you want to explore those kind of stories, I don't think I could have done that if I didn't know Jay so well and didn't feel such a connection in terms of it's literally like my best friend and someone that was there for me quite a lot in that time. So that's what I'd say. When we made this film, it brought us really close as friends.
When you guys were working on this project together, like, what did you know about Palestine, Jay? Because a lot of people have only been introduced to what's happened in Palestine through October 7, right? They might have not known anything beforehand. Like, what was your in on what was happening in Palestine?
So throughout the first year of uni, there were a couple chats between me and Omar, just talking about our family and our history. So I was understanding a little bit more about the situation then, but didn't really switch on until after October 7th. And I'll never forget the day. There was a day in sometime after the 7th of October, Omar comes into the kitchen and you break down crying. And as a friend, you see one of the strongest, like smartest, most energetic, charismatic people break down in front of you. And you think, I don't know, how can you help? What can you try and do to understand what you're going through? And that's why I feel like this film really worked quite well, because for documentary film, you need great access if you want to make a really good story. And the access we had as friends living together, sharing the same food, sharing the same laughs, sharing the same friends, I think it really made the film as good as it is, which is why it's been recognized by the BFI, I think.
I'd say like on that, like in terms of, from my perspective, I always said to Jay and to all my friends actually, like as a Palestinian, the most important thing for me that you can do is to educate yourself, is to learn, is to understand the context of why does this break my heart? Why does this break millions of people's hearts around the world? Is not necessarily, for people to, I suppose in a way, there's lots of different ways that people might respond to that situation. But for me, what meant the most and what really, I would say, consolidated my love for Jay and like all of my friends actually was their willingness to learn and to educate themselves, to read books. I remember giving Nell, my friend, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, is the Ian Pape book. And I just said to everyone, like, that's the most important thing to do right now, is to understand why we feel this way. And also, yeah, as you said, it's not something that started on October the 7th either. That's something really important that I really wanted people to understand. And that's kind of what I'm really trying in all my work going forward to make very clear, is that this didn't start 2 years ago. And actually for my family, this has been an ongoing, like a lifelong situation that we've been born into essentially. And understanding the context behind that was really important for me.
When I was watching the film, I saw footage of protests. Did you capture that footage? Is that all your own?
Yeah.
There was one bit where a woman was dragged down by her hijab. I don't know if you remember which part that was, but what was happening there? Like, do you guys remember?
Yeah, that was a crazy.
It's really aggressive.
Yeah.
There's it was around, I think, March or April in 2024, and there was an incident in Newcastle University's campus where there was a group of the protesters in Newcastle that were calling out the university's complicity in the genocide. So investment in weapons companies on campus. I think in Leonardo Systems used Newcastle University's campus to conduct research. And there was also an incident at the careers fair where there's BAE Systems advertising their internships and apprenticeships, but also it's very well documented their role in the genocide as well. So in response, there was a big uproar on the campus, and the main hall in our university is sort of where you graduate. there's a big statue of Martin Luther King outside the hall. I think it's called Armstrong Building. And that day, the students went into the building and occupied it in protest, and were sitting inside. And there was about 200 police just on our campus, kind of forming barricades, shoving people, getting them out of the building. And there was no, I think there's no accountability since that day. But as you saw in the footage, there's lots of videos where I think someone had broke their arm, someone sprained their knee. There was a lot of violence,
unnecessary violence.
Yeah.
On the
and
police side.
it's a pretty common theme in Newcastle, especially, I'd say, of people demonstrating for Palestine, and a very brutal reaction from Northumbria police, which is very unfortunate, because actually you could speak to quite a few of them and realize that probably we're on the same page, but it just takes one or two of them to kind of to flip and have that moment of craziness, and it's like a mob mentality almost. You're kind of looking at these people as if they're meant to protect you, and in fact days like that make you really question, like, what are they there to do?
There's a lot of tension on campus during that time in the summer of 2024, where a lot of police were coming onto campus with the encampment, and eventually the encampment was dissolved after a few months. But for a long period of time, there was constant police presence on campus. It felt over security, just patrolling. It felt quite oppressive in a way. There was no need. It was all peaceful. Obviously, people were appalled by what was going on. People felt a right to speak up and stand and speak up about it.
You understand they need to do their job, but then you see clips like that girl's dragged by her hijab onto the floor
by a male police officer,
and by the way, there was no justice in that scenario as well. So maybe one of many incidents along those lines as well.
Yeah, students were demonized quite a lot during those encampments. They were happening all over, and I just remember the media, Suella, everyone that was talking about it were really demonizing it, making out like it was like anti-Semitic, and hate marches for when there was protests. So it must have been quite hard for you guys also to like film the footage, create this film, but also like compress everything and work out what's going on, right?
So luckily we had a lot of people who were sending in footage of the sort of portrait clips that were sent in. They're all included at the beginning, which was a nice show, at the beginning of the film. It's just a nice thing of the community of Newcastle kind of wanting to be a part of the project as well, because I think that's what the film is also. It's also about Newcastle as a community, sort of coming together. Everyone was on the same page and at the demonstrations, and it was good to see Newcastle. I think it's also, Omar, how we connected with Newcastle. Yeah, you could probably speak more about that.
Yeah, I think in terms of the students being demonized and that theme, like, it was very common throughout, I'd say, the entire, I think it was like 3 or 4 months the encampment went on. Newcastle had an encampment. I know Sheffield had one. There's quite a few in London as well. Maybe I think we're looking at 20 different encampments. But I think there's a different feeling within other unis how the university responded. For us in Newcastle, really there was never any sort of dialogue or respect between the students and the university. And you'd sort of get moments where you'd have sort of the senior members of the university walking past the encampment and sort of just being so apathetic and negative towards it, where you look at history and you look at sort of maybe the students who protested for the Vietnam War in the 70s and 80s, and the reaction, I think, is very different in hindsight now. But at the time, I'm sure the response from the community was a very negative and, as you say, demonizing response. But these people, if you speak to them, and we, by the way, in the film, we've platformed some of these people that were running the encampment. They are some of the best people I've ever met in terms of how loving they are, how peaceful they are, how hopeful they are for a better world. And the way that they were treated by the university was actually quite disgusting. And I just have a feeling that, in terms of, we speak about Suella Braverman, people like that, I don't really think that's something that we're not going to bridge a connection between us and Suella Braverman. But if you're a university with a responsibility of the welfare of your students, it would have been really nice to see a little bit more care and love from that set of people. But unfortunately, the way it panned out, this is one of those things I think in 10 years will be painted in a very different way, but we have the footage, we were there. It was a very brutal time actually to be a student in that encampment.
If you had to summarize what the goal of this film is, what would you say? This is to both of you. Like, what would you describe the goal as, and what is it that you want to achieve?
I'd say from my perspective, it's just about telling my story. I think there's power in when somebody, a face you recognize or somebody you know, speaking and telling their story in a very intimate way. I think that's a way for people to understand the magnitude of what's happening in Palestine. And it's quite easy sometimes for people disconnected completely to the conflict. So some of my friends at university who have no friends in their life or family that are even vaguely involved in Palestine or anything relating to the activism of Palestine. So for me, telling my story is a vehicle to help people understand. And I think that's the main thing that we need more of, is a bit more understanding in people. And
I think the way some stories are represented in the media, it's very sort of unbiased and unanimous. And having a personal story, which is so relevant to the whole historical context of everything that's been going on in the Levant and in the area, it's, I mean, especially for me, it really helped me understand more about what was happening. And it also drove me to research more, start reading Chomsky and Ilan Pappé and all the good authors who were writing the correct.
the factual.
Exactly, yeah, the things that make sense.
But then even it's the image of Palestine and the kind of rehumanizing Palestinian people. I think that's the main mission with the film. It's that we are people. We're like you, and also we feel things. we have our own culture. We have our own perspective in the world, and I think that's something that's been really stripped away from the Palestinian people in the last 2 years. Amongst many other things, I think that's one of the worst things that's happened. It's that we've become a statistic. We've become a controversial political talking point, but actually let's remember that we are just people. We are a group of people that exist in the world. So I think that's probably more than anything, it's just to rehumanize the Palestinian people. And I think some of the best ways you can do that is by telling a personal story. So that day we were actually at a protest, and I didn't intend to speak. It kind of got to a point in the protest where like no one was speaking, like no one was on the mic. So I was just, right, I went up. I was speaking about the way that Newcastle has made me feel at home in the last 2 years. And the film explores me discovering my identity. And I'd say that in that time, being in this community and this group of people, especially within the Newcastle Palestine Solidarity Campaign, I found a group of people in a place that I could be, where I genuinely felt welcomed, and this shared feeling of grief that I'm experiencing and pain, all these people share it every day. And I think in a lot of ways, a lot of friends that I have that maybe weren't affected by what happened in Palestine, or almost had no reaction to it. You probably have some friends yourself that were quite indifferent, or until it was sort of trending, they wouldn't say anything, or so to be amongst these people and seeing emotionally how it affected quite a lot of even white people in Newcastle, that for me felt like the place that I belong in and amongst those people. And I think for me, that's been one of the most valuable things I've ever found in my life, is a place where, despite the efforts of the Israeli occupation to make me and all of the other Palestinians in the diaspora to never feel at home, actually, that was kind of their aim, is for everywhere we go to feel alienated and never welcomed and never able to sustain our lives. Actually, in Newcastle, that's the place where, for me, I felt, hey, I know who I am, and I made the decision in that day to spend my life pursuing that and just spreading the message of what Palestinian culture is. So yeah, for me that was really, really special, and that happened through the film, which is it's really beautiful actually. Yeah.
Did the film evolve from when you were actually planning it to filming it? Did it ever change, or?
Yeah.
Changed quite a lot throughout throughout this
Massively.
process. I think there was a point where we really had to hit the deadline for the uni project, and we were really just hammering down kind of like every night until the early hours of the morning. But it was the end quotes at the end that Omar just quickly wrote on his phone, and it was everything that was inside, and you just, I don't know, you wrote it in a way, and we recorded it there and then inserted it, and it was like, this is what makes the ending of the film. It really rounds it off really nicely. But that was like a really impressive little moment where we'd been working on it for a long time, and you just quickly came up with these really nice words that just rounded off the film so beautifully.
But I think we didn't plan anything. I think me and Jay were kind of amazed in a way that when we put together the film, it was a case of actually in the post filming, we made the story out of the footage, but also in the moment, like we just had these different days of moments that were real life. Like this was all unfolding, if you can imagine. Like it's we didn't know what was going to happen next week. We didn't know how the situation was going to change, and so the film had never had a rigid structure at all.
One quote that I want to discuss is, Omar, when you said that you enter a state of mind that's not a very healthy state of mind.
Yeah.
What was that like for you? And also, Jay, for you as a friend, you're living in close proximity, you're working together. Like, how was that?
I'd say like that, when I describe that being one of the hardest times of my life, I'd say that it was because I'm almost trying to live two lives. I'm trying to have this part of me that breaks down every time I look at my phone, and every time I leave the house and think about these people in Palestine. And I think in a way maybe all of us were desensitized very quickly, and that's terrible. That actually there's this really unique form of mental illness now that we're all going to have to navigate. But for us, a fraction of what they have to navigate in Palestine. So let's always remember that. But for me, I'd say at that time, like how do you go to university and go to chemistry lectures and do your assignments and act like everything's fine, and almost in a way seeing everyone around me living their life, going out fine, and maybe feeling like I'm the only one like feeling this way almost. That's maybe what was really hard about it, is that the world just kept going around me, because the UK is so detached from Palestine and so detached as a society in terms of how we experience grief for a conflict in the Middle East. It's not really sort of socially accepted in a way that, this is something that would impact our society. The whole world needs to keep going. And my whole world was not able to do that. So there were moments where I was quite vulnerable with Jay. And as I say, like him as my friend, and why this project meant so much to me is that like he was there for me in that moment, and him and all my friends were there for me in that moment. And I found strength in that, and we made this film almost as a letter of that period of time, but I don't know what I would have done without this as a medium to express that, and it's in a way for me, that's why it was really special.
I think when we started filming, like we said, there was no structure, and we sat down one day thinking we should get like a nice talking head interview shot, which we never ended up including in the final cut of the film, but it was like a 4-hour sort of conversation between me and Omar, quite relaxed, a little bit like this is now, which really kind of got the whole story and everything down on the table. So we had it on paper. And I think that helped sort of, it was me hearing a lot of stuff for the first time, and also for a way of Omar kind of speaking about things in an open way. And that's where a lot of the good quotes came from that we used in the film. And that was just from an open, honest
just told
conversation.
You my life story.
Yeah, just for 4 hours.
Down and just had a really good conversation for 4 hours, and just the history of my family and the you know, even for me, like understanding the history of my family and my own culture is something that I wasn't necessarily exposed to when I was a kid, because I grew up in a completely different country to all of them. So in a way, I was having conversations with my dad, with my mum, and asking them questions for the first time as well, getting to know more about my family in Gaza, in Palestine. How did everybody end up in Amman? I was born in Amman, so understanding even how we got there is something that I think was really important, just for me as an individual. Forget the film, forget everything. And I think even for many Arabs I know living in the UK, is maybe a similar story in terms of that dual identity that you mentioned. And I think understanding your history is so important, because I bet you, like, most Arabs, they have family members who have insane stories of how they got to where they are and how they were able to be in a position sitting in the UK with a nice education and whatever. So I think that was something that was a big turning point in making the film as well, was really just delving into my story for myself and for the film.
One other thing I like that you guys did in the film is there was that woman who was doing a speech at one of the encampments, I think, and she was talking about the chant from the river to the sea, and how the media or some people are responding to that as if you're trying to erase Israel. And she was clarifying basically that that's not what the chant is about. So there's a couple of misconceptions that you guys bust in the film, even the section where you're about to type October 7, then you delete it. Is there anything else that you wish people knew about what's happening in Palestine, other than what you've already included in the film? Is there anything that you can think of that maybe you didn't know beforehand, or something you really wish people knew?
I think the UK's role in how Palestine was divided and the Balfour Declaration. I think a lot of people don't realise how directly responsible the UK is for what happened in Palestine in 1918. And I think if more people understood that in the UK, and you look at some of the disgusting response that's happened amongst our politicians, amongst the general public even, and a lot of people even saying that it's got nothing to do with us in the UK, and let's focus on our problems and leave that to the Arabs or whatever. I think that kind of sentiment is so unbelievably ignorant when you understand that literally less than 100 years ago, our government actually directly caused the situation, and the people's kind of response to that, I think, needs to be more directed towards our institutions and our government, and not kind of just detaching yourself from this as if the UK has got nothing to do with it. Actually, the UK have everything to do with this. And that urgency of, right, like, we caused this, I think needs to be more present within our conversations. And again, that kind of links back to the historical context, and why educating yourself is very important to understand what exactly happened, how did this unfold.
And I think this is something that Omar and I will try and touch on in future projects. I think our next one will hopefully dive more into the history, perhaps even going back to the Middle East. And we spent a summer in Jordan for a few weeks, which was amazing.
Lovely summer in Jordan.
Meeting Omar's family, eating some amazing food.
You know, when you bring like your white friends to the Arab world, is
Was it chaotic?
In a
Did it feel
amazing
chaotic?
way.
Yeah,
But in a fantastic way. I
Yeah.
think one of the first nights there was a Dubka band that came, played music, we ate mansaf, makluba, all the amazing meals.
Jay has become an honorary Arab.
I love that.
It was really, yeah. So I think that is the aim, to go back and, explore more stories, more history, and just make it clear to people in England, because I think people are very disconnected and also just overstimulated by what's going on.
It's not
nice.
people's fault either. Like, I don't feel like angry when somebody doesn't know what's happening or has a wrong impression or something. I think it's more just our job as Palestinians with this privilege and this platform to speak, is to educate people. And unfortunately, the system we live in doesn't really have a focus on bringing people the correct education. I think they have other interests. And essentially that's a patient process. That's something you have to hear a lot of crazy statements and preconceptions that people, you know, will give me in passing when I'm speaking about Palestine. Have an interesting conversation with someone. Obviously, I'm sure you have experience of just speaking to people on varying levels of intellect. So I think it's a difficult thing, but you have to be patient. And I don't necessarily, I just wanted to add in, I don't look down on people for not knowing. I think it's more important that we all just speak about this and we normalize this conversation.
And also the arts is a great medium for that. Like, that's why sometimes when it's hard to have a conversation, a film can tell 1,000 stories. So
course,
I completely understand what you're saying. I actually wanted to segue into music since we're talking about the arts. You're on some decks. I didn't know if it was decorative or if you actually had to use
Not
them.
at all, no.
No,
Not at all decorative.
And you said at the end that through Palestinian and Arabic music, you've kind of built this community, and just for a moment, you feel at home in that situation as well. So how did that happen? And 3 artists I need to have in my playlist.
All right. So when me and Jay met, I moved into uni. I just bought a set of decks, like my first
Entry
DJ
level.
400. Yeah, like I was just bought them, going to uni, like, right.
Trying to make it as a student DJ, as most students do when they come to uni.
And Jay had like the crazy, shiny, oh my God.
You DJ as
spaceship.
well?
So I was the one who sort of
Spaceship.
helped Omar start his journey as a DJ.
That was how
I had
we-
a good
You
friend,
two are
Matt.
too much, man. The
Yeah,
way that
So
you guys.
that's how the DJing story evolved.
Love.
Omar ended up taking
Yeah.
over the scene, skyrocketed like every club. Now he's doing really well in Newcastle. I've kind of been left in the dirt. No, I'm joking.
Wow,
not
what's
at all.
that?
Not at all. But Omar really sees the opportunity, and
I started like DJing house music, garage music, UK garage, like just in clubs in Newcastle. But then I suppose around the time that we did our first fundraiser for Palestine, which was in November 2023, so just after October, that we raised just short of £10,000 for medical aid for Palestinians, but also we put on a very beautiful night for Palestine in Newcastle, in the, I would say, probably the best club in Newcastle, World Headquarters. It's a club which also stood for, the Black community in the 90s, especially. It was always a space for kind of the people on the fringes of society to express themselves and to speak their truth. So it was really nice for World Headquarters to return to that for our fundraiser. And since then, we've done, we're going into our 3rd year now this year, our 3rd fundraiser. And we do these Arabic music nights essentially in Newcastle. And the aim is to celebrate Palestinian culture without even speaking about Israel. We don't even say their name. We only want to celebrate the beauty of Palestinian culture, the music, the food, the art. And I think there's such a beauty and such a rich culture there that most people never heard about. So that was kind of the idea for the fundraisers. And as you say, sometimes having conversations about politics is just not the way in for probably 90% of people, actually. So speaking about art, speaking about music, which are things that we all share in common, is a much more, I think, positive message, firstly, but also I think a much more important one, because for me personally, I don't think there's anything I can add to the political discussion that hasn't been said a million times in the last 2 years. It's actually quite surprising how little there is in terms of the cultural discussion, though. So with Zeytoun Arts is the collective that we founded in Newcastle. And it's, our film is our first Zeytoun Arts production. We kind of wanted to put a longevity to the project of putting on this kind of cultural celebration, and not just a one-off fundraiser to raise some money and move on. Our aim is very much now to continue this message, irrespective of the politics, irrespective of what happens in Palestine. I'd love to use my platform here as someone in music to continue to speak about Palestine and to celebrate it. And we, as you said, we have some amazing music, 3 songs. I think I have to say Scanlan-Oumow by Fayrouz.
Use that in your film.
yeah.
And
Good
it's
choice.
beautiful
the
song.
soundtrack
Yeah.
of the film. It's probably the most beautiful song I've ever heard in my life. It's a song which speaks about the longing to return to our lands. And yeah, Saner by Fatal is number one. You give us a tune.
Yasmin Hamdan is a really good artist as well. I think they were in a group, Soap Kills, a long while ago. It's more trip hoppy, but they're really good. I'm trying to think of more Arabic artists.
Final song, General Suleiman.
Yeah.
By
He's
Zayd
always
and
going
the
to be
Wings.
included.
Do you know this tune? Do you know that one?
That's a good one.
That has to be in there.
Good choice, guys. I believe that
Thank
you're on
you.
the decks now.
Thank you.
What I think is really great about it is because I specialize in music culture, the repeated comment I see when people are celebrating Palestinian culture in this time is, how is this helping Palestine? You're dancing while they're in a war zone, right? And I have a very big issue with this comment because it can't all be misery. It can't only be about, to preserve an identity, you can't just focus on the history of what's happened. You also have to look at what makes those people them, the culture, the music, the art. Have you ever faced that kind of struggle to be like, is this right? Is this how I should be helping? Or
yeah, it's something that frustrates me a lot, actually. But also I understand it. I very much understand it from an outside perspective. But also, I'd say in a way, being Palestinian, it kind of, there is that identity crisis and there is that kind of survivor's guilt perhaps within me. But also, you know, speaking to Palestinians, if you've ever had the chance to speak to a Palestinian, they are actually some of the people that strive for life the most. They're some of the most hopeful people, and people that no matter what the circumstances are, they'll continue. And essentially for me, I think it's in the Palestinian spirit that despite whatever the hell is going on over there and what's happening, that we continue to speak about our culture and to celebrate it. And in a way, like, that's what I think would fuel this occupation, would fuel this apartheid, is if we stopped speaking about our culture, if we stopped telling people about our music, if we stopped dancing, if we stopped saying our poems, or, you know, speaking about our artwork. I think these things are resistance. And I think, especially within the context of the UK at the moment, there are some ways you can do a Palestine fundraiser that are very insensitive. Don't get me wrong. There are definitely ways that you can completely misrepresent, or to actually maybe put what you were discussing in terms of a misleading or a misrepresentative show on. But at the heart of all our shows and fundraisers is the idea to celebrate the culture, to celebrate the sounds, to celebrate the food, the art. And I think as long as you're kind of putting the focus on that's the most important thing, that you're celebrating Palestine and you're amplifying the beauty of the culture, then I think that it doesn't really strike me as anything but a beautiful form of resistance.
the film is called Ana Dammi Falasteeni, which is after a very iconic song, I'm assuming, right? Tell me what that means to you, because actually at the end of the film, you even say, my identity was always in my blood, even though you've been searching for that. Yeah. Can you just comment on what that means, Ana Dammi Falasteeni?
Yeah, means my blood is Palestinian in Arabic, and is the name of probably the most famous Palestinian song. And I'd say for me that song speaks to a feeling of, as I say in the film, that it was always in my blood, in terms of being in Newcastle and finding home and finding that sort of space to feel the most Palestinian that I've ever felt in my life. I'd say that song to me means connection with my country and with my people. And it's such a good song. I mean, just to play, especially during our fundraisers and things, where it's like an anthem almost for Palestine now. And yeah, it's a song which definitely historically as well has always been used as a form of resistance and a way to galvanize people, and understanding the history of what the song used to be about and where it came from. I think it was actually historically, it wasn't made as a recorded song initially. It was a song sung by sort of people in
Folk
Palestine.
music.
Exactly, yeah. So the context of that, and then now what it means to me in the 21st century, discovering my identity, yeah, it feels like me connecting with my heritage.
It's a shame it's not the Arabic title everywhere. We have
Yeah,
to
we have-
compromise and make it English, but yeah, it's good. It makes it more known. Everyone will understand what it's about. Yeah.
Where can people watch your film?
Yeah, so there's a screening tonight at
Yep.
the View West End Cinema, and that's at 8:40 p.m. You can maybe get a ticket on the door, but this is not going to go out in time.
Probably not, but
You
it's
can watch
okay.
the film on YouTube, though. We've released it on Zeytoun Arts YouTube page. If you type in Zeytoun Arts on Instagram, that's our page. And if you click in the bio, there's a YouTube premiere, which comes out at 6 p.m. tonight, Monday, the 13th of October. And please watch it. Please share it. And yeah, it's a really special film. And it's 13 minutes.
Is there anything else you guys would like to say?
Just keep using art as a resistance, I think.
Yeah.
And of course, free Palestine.
Free
Always.
Palestine.
Yeah.